Why did the enemies the U.S. faced under Obama, Trump, and Biden look so different? Why did some threats vanish, while others exploded onto the global stage, catching even the experts off guard? From terrorist networks to rival nations, from cyber attacks to sudden wars, each presidency faced challenges that shaped history in ways most people never saw. Some battles were fought in distant lands, others in boardrooms or online. Today, we're diving into the real story, fact-based, unbiased and clear, of America's enemies under these three presidents, and what it reveals about the shifting world order. 1. Setting the stage, understanding U.S. threats. To understand the enemies each president faced, we need to step back and look at the bigger picture. Enemies in U.S. politics aren't always clear-cut. They can be foreign nations, terrorist groups, cyber attackers, or even emerging global powers challenging America's influence. After September 11th, the United States entered a new era where threats were no longer just conventional armies. They became decentralized, unpredictable, and sometimes invisible. By the time Obama took office in 2009, the world had already changed dramatically. Al-Qaeda was still active, new extremist groups were rising, and tensions with Russia were simmering after the conflict in Georgia. Meanwhile, global technology was accelerating, creating new cyber vulnerabilities that would later define the Trump and Biden years. These threats weren't just about military power. They influenced trade, diplomacy, and domestic security. Understanding them is like looking at a complex map of shifting pressure points, where one misstep could trigger global consequences. Each president had to navigate this evolving landscape, balancing immediate crises with long-term strategy. And that's why, when we look at Obama, Trump, and Biden, the enemies they faced aren't just lists of names. They tell a story of changing priorities, global shifts, and the constant challenge of keeping America secure in a complex, unpredictable world. 2. Barack Obama, 2009 to 2017. When Barack Obama took office in 2009, the world was already on edge. Al-Qaeda, still reeling from the U.S. operations in Afghanistan and Pakistan, remained a dangerous threat. But a new, more brutal challenge was emerging. ISIS, born from the chaos in Iraq and Syria, would soon reshape global terrorism. While Obama focused on reducing large-scale military involvement overseas, these groups exploited the power vacuum, spreading fear and destabilizing entire regions. Russia, too, was quietly asserting itself. The 2008 Georgia conflict had already tested U.S. influence, and by 2014, the annexation of Crimea signaled a new era of geopolitical tension. These moves challenged America's strategic position without triggering full-scale war, but they demanded constant attention. On the home front, early cyber threats were growing, laying the foundation for the battles that would dominate the next two presidencies. And then came the decisive moment that defined Obama's counterterrorism legacy, Operation Neptune Spear, the mission that ended Osama bin Laden's life. For Obama, enemies were often invisible, hybrid, and unpredictable. The balance was delicate: fight abroad, maintain alliances, and respond to threats that didn't always fit neatly into traditional definitions of war. By the end of his presidency, the global map of danger had shifted, but the story was far from over. When Donald Trump entered the White House, America's enemies looked very different from the Obama era. ISIS, once a growing threat, was largely defeated on the battlefield, but new challenges had emerged. North Korea, with its unpredictable nuclear program, demanded global attention, while China was becoming a strategic rival in trade, technology, and influence. Meanwhile, Iran remained a persistent point of tension, and domestic extremist groups began drawing increased scrutiny from U.S. intelligence agencies. Trump's approach marked a shift: diplomacy mixed with direct confrontation, sanctions and high-profile summits. The historic meetings with North Korea stunned the world, showing a new style of negotiation: risky, unconventional, and highly public. At the same time, escalating tensions with China extended far beyond the battlefield, influencing supply chains, tariffs, and global economic dynamics. Even in the Middle East, America maintained a strong counterterrorism stance, ensuring ISIS could not recover, but with less reliance on traditional alliances and more emphasis on rapid, decisive action. For Trump, enemies were no longer just distant networks. They included powerful nations, economic rivals, and emerging domestic threats. The battleground had expanded beyond conventional warfare, signaling a transformation in how the U.S. navigated global and domestic security in the modern era. For Joe Biden, under Joe Biden, the U.S. faces a new era of complex, multidimensional threats. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 quickly became the defining global crisis, forcing America into high-stakes diplomacy, military support, and economic sanctions. At the same time, China's rise as a strategic competitor in the Asia-Pacific region has intensified tensions over trade, technology, and influence. Unlike previous presidencies, these challenges aren't confined to traditional battlefields. They extend to cyber warfare, economic dominance, and international alliances. Cyber threats have grown exponentially, targeting infrastructure, government agencies, and private companies. Domestic extremist groups also continue to pose internal security challenges, showing that America's enemies can be both abroad and at home. Biden's approach has focused on coalition building, strengthening NATO, and maintaining a balance between direct action and strategic diplomacy. This era emphasizes adaptability, responding to fast-moving crises, coordinating with allies, and managing threats that are fluid and unpredictable. For Biden, enemies are less about single groups or nations and more about interconnected global pressures, reflecting a world where military, economic, and technological fronts are inseparable. The story now is clear. Modern U.S. security is a web of challenges, and navigating it requires foresight, strategy, and constant vigilance. 5. Comparing the three presidencies. Looking at Obama, Trump, and Biden side by side reveals a striking evolution in the challenges America faces. Under Obama, the focus was on terrorist networks and regional instability. Groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS exploited gaps left by prolonged wars. Trump's era shifted attention to state actors, with North Korea, China, and Iran moving to the center of U.S. strategy, alongside emerging domestic threats. Biden, meanwhile, faces hybrid threats, a combination of aggressive nations, cyber attacks, and domestic radicalization, all unfolding simultaneously on multiple fronts. Each presidency also highlights different methods of engagement. Obama relied on measured, strategic action and coalition building. Trump leaned toward direct confrontation, unorthodox diplomacy, and rapid, high-impact decisions. Biden emphasizes multilateral coordination, technology-driven security, and crisis management across interconnected domains. The comparison reveals a clear pattern. America's enemies are not static. They evolve with global power shifts, technological change, and domestic pressures. What was urgent in 2009 became less critical by 2017, and today, challenges are broader, faster, and more complex than ever. Understanding these shifts isn't about assigning blame. It's about seeing the world through the lens of strategy, history, and the realities of global power. It's a story of adaptation, resilience, and the constant recalibration required to keep America secure. Studying the enemies America faced under Obama, Trump, and Biden isn't about judgment. It's about understanding how global dynamics shift and how U.S. leadership responds. From terrorist networks to rising superpowers, from cyber attacks to domestic challenges, each presidency tells a story of adaptation and strategy. The world has changed, and so has the nature of threats, requiring presidents to balance immediate crises with long-term planning. By looking at these patterns, we see not just who America faced, but how the nation navigates an increasingly complex, unpredictable global stage. If you want clear, no-nonsense breakdowns of what's really happening in U.S. politics, Make sure you subscribe.